Welcome to AI Decoded. It's that time of the week when we'll look in depth at some of the most eye-catching stories in the world of artificial intelligence. This week we'll turn our attention to employment and what impact AI could have on the world of work. Well, according to this CNN business article, AI is replacing human tasks faster than you might think. More than half of large US firms plan to use AI within the next year to automate tasks that were previously done by staff in a bid to cut costs, boost profits and make their work, as they say, more productive. We'll talk to Cisco and to Salesforce in a moment about their plans to adopt generative AI in the workplace. But what is the potential human cost to all of this? Well, the New York Times reports that generative AI could automate activities equivalent to 300 million full-time jobs around the world. OpenAI's chief executive, that's Sam Altman, says governments will need to assume the bulk of responsibility in supporting workers' AI labour market disruptions. And the question, will employees just end up training AI systems only to then be replaced by them? The New York Times also looks at how call centre workers are quickly being overtaken by generative AI, and there are now warnings that entire industries could be compromised, mostly of AI chatbots in as soon as a year. Well, later in the programme, we'll speak to the writer of both of those New York Times articles. So let's talk about some of those stories. With me now, our regular AI contributor, Stephanie Hare, and also with us, Chintan Patel, who's Chief Technology Officer for Cisco in the UK and Ireland. Also joining us is from San Francisco is Natalie Scardino, who's President and Chief People Officer at Salesforce. Really good to have all of you with us on the context tonight. And Chintan, let me start with you, because you've been putting numbers on this, haven't you, looking at how many jobs could be disrupted by AI. And I think you've put it at 23% of all jobs will evolve. That sounds manageable as a number, but when you start looking at the individual roles, it is a huge number, isn't it?
Well, this is quite a transformational area at the moment, what we're seeing. And often with these sorts of technological changes, we see that we sort of tend to overestimate the impact in the short term and underestimate the long-term impact. What we do see is that actually the type of jobs that are now actually being created as a result of AI are very interesting, across a broad spectrum of industries and a broad spectrum of professions. And we do believe that actually, some of the sort of the mundane activities and tasks that can be automated are being automated, but actually driving up productivity for organizations, which can only be a good thing in its broadest sense.
And Stephanie, I mean, there's always that concern, isn't there, that AI is going to pinch all of our jobs. And we'll talk about sort of how these models, get taught and trained in a set. But, people will have a real fear that the technology will put them out of work.
Yeah, there's certain types of jobs that I think are much more vulnerable than others. So if you're a hairdresser or a florist or doing something with your hands where I think you're quite safe from computers for the moment, you're probably fine. And AI will actually maybe make your life better in terms of stripping out invoicing or annoying accountancy sorts of tasks. But if you are, yes, working in a call center, something where your job could be automated, that is something that you need to be looking at for the next few years. And what was interesting was that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said it's the government's job to be retraining people and taking responsibility for all of this job losses. But the government is us. So it's really the taxpayer who's going to have to pick up the bill for this technology putting people out of work.
Yeah, Natalie, let me bring you in as well. I mean, because you're putting some of these systems into your workplace, aren't you? I think you said you've got about 50 AI-powered tools that you're deploying within the offices there. What do they look like? What will these tools do?
Yeah, so, we have been in the business of predictive AI for the last decade. Over 1 trillion customer insights are built on our platform every single week. And now here we are in the generative AI revolution. When it comes to the employee experience, some of the AI deployments are things like, a lot of our employees were spending time looking at disparate systems to find knowledge articles, access to benefits, who to speak to on the first day, how to onboard and ramp. And now with AI applications that we've deployed, they don't have to go to multiple systems anymore. And in fact, some of the other AI deployments are now serving up predictive insights so that if you're a new hire It will say, hey, did you know this is where you should look to go for your first day? This is the type of information that you might need. If you're a new manager, how do you become a new manager? Are you spending enough time with your teams? And AI is actually serving up that information versus now employees having to look for it. So those are some of the deployments that we've seen at large.
And I'm looking at what that's allowed you to do. I mean, as you said, free up time, allow those staff to do other things. You're saying 1/4 employees saved a combined 50,000 hours. Call me a cynic, but are you just therefore putting those people to work harder? Or are you saying, actually, you can have a day off, go home, you've saved a load of time? I mean, how does that work? How do we square that circle?
Well, I think like, any other benefits of becoming more efficient or more productive, it is now spending more time on higher value impact work in your job. Those are the core benefits that we've seen from our teams. Instead of spending, 10% of your time looking for information, the information to do your job is coming to you. So I think it's been a massive, massive value add for our teams, and they give us a lot of feedback on it around the globe as well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point, isn't it? If it frees us up time, it makes us more productive, but it possibly doesn't get us that extra day off or a 3-day, 4-day working week that we might all want. Chintan, talk to me about skills as well, because, there's a danger that we focus on all of this and on what it can deliver. But frankly, it needs people that understand it, not only to monitor it, but the risks from it, things like cyber risks that grow as we adopt AI. But whether we are training people for the right jobs of the future.
Yeah, I think that's just a hugely important point. We can draw a lot of parallels from, what we as a company have learned from the internet, where, we've been at the heart of the internet for over 40 years. And when you think about it, there is no AI without data. There is no data without the network to actually connect act as the connective tissue to the algorithms that are answering our questions and giving us our responses. And actually, if you can't secure that end to end, then that's where that trust issue really comes into it, as you mentioned, around cybersecurity. And when we first started sort of the journey in the internet, we saw the opportunity to actually train people around a program called Cisco's Networking Academy, and that's been going for over 25 years. We've trained 20 million people in 190 countries around the world. We see the same thing happening again, where we have to train the next generation in both these advanced AI skills, but also some of the fundamental essential digital skills that we need. We've got an increasing sort of divide between those who have the top end skills, but actually perhaps people who don't have some of the more basic digital skills that we need. And a lot of the research from organizations like Future.now and Lloyd's, which talk about the gap that exists within society of actually just doing the basics. So we've got to do both to help society.
Yeah, and so that's a sort of skills gap, isn't it? And Stephanie, I wonder whether firms are ready, because I'm looking at numbers here. 97% of companies say that, yes, they know they need to do this, but I think, 14% say they're actually ready to do it. That's quite the gap.
Yeah, and we just saw yesterday here in the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister was discussing, this sort of plan for the King's speech, all of the new government's policies. They're very thin on AI, and that was a real moment for this new government to say, this is how we're going to update the UK education curriculums. When we say we need to train everybody up in AI, who is we? Is it the companies? Are they going to actually start putting money where their mouth is, right, and train people up? Are we talking about overhauling the education curriculum from age 5 to 18 and then into the universities? Who's funding that, and who has the skills to even do it?
Yeah, and that is a big question. And Stephanie, you're always our guide on this programme, aren't you, through all things AI? And I know you've got questions for our panel. We've got two big players here. What do you want to know? So
what I want to know is, first of all of this automation, we're saying we're going to be getting rid of the most sort of banal tasks and making it so that people are free to do value-added tasks. But that value add is going to shareholders and CEOs. It's not going back to people, and it's not meaning where we can all work less, for instance. What can we do to make it so that AI is valuable for everybody and not just the usual people who profit from technology?
Yeah, Natalie, let's throw that to you first of all, because you've been nodding along here. What do you make of what Stephanie's asking?
It's a great question, Stephanie, absolutely. When you think about for us, equality, inclusion. How do you make sure that, to your exact point, AI is used to democratize access to jobs, access to different experiences? We're really focused on that. Even in our hiring organization right now, we've been leveraging AI to source the planet for talent. You know, we receive over 2 million applications every single year here at Salesforce, and we want to make sure that we're not leaving any talent unhidden. And AI is helping us optimize that. So I do see, the advancements of democratizing access to AI through those efforts as well. But it's something we think about all of the time, related to trust and, making sure that how you're creating your products, who's building your products, is it representative of the world, of societies, of communities? All these things are also super core to the design process.
Yeah, Chintan, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I'd second those comments, and I'd also say, companies like Cisco and others have signed the Rome Call by the Vatican, which is really centered on the fact that we can't lose sight of human dignity as we develop these systems and actually create an inclusive future for all where everybody prospers. And so, at the heart of everything that we're doing, like Salesforce at Cisco, we are very focused on building a responsible AI framework, but one that does then extend out and bring large parts of society together and help us collectively progress.
We will talk some more about this. There's so much more to discuss as far as our jobs are concerned and what role AI will play in all of that. But for now, thank you. And still to come on AI Decoded, are we destined to teach AI how to do our own jobs? We're going to speak to one reporter who's been researching the threat posed to workers and how some are now fighting back. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to AI Decoded. Now, we're going to focus on the impact of AI in the workplace. And while the tech may be able to speed up and automate all sorts of monotonous or repetitive roles, but there's also now a concern that tech, like intelligent chatbots, could replace roles that have traditionally relied on a more human touch, things like customer service or call centre helplines. Well, Stephanie is still with us, our regular AI contributor and presenter, and we can also introduce you to Emma Goldberg, who's from the New York Times, and Emma's a business reporter covering workplace culture and the ways that work is evolving in a time of social and technological change. Emma, good to have you with us, and I want to start, I touched on your report in the introduction to this programme, and I said you've been looking at people who are finding themselves in that very peculiar position of having to train the technology that will ultimately do their jobs.
Exactly. So I think when people look at what AI is capable of, there's no question that it's going to really transform the way we all do our jobs. I mean, there was a Goldman Sachs estimate that recently that AI could automate the equivalent of up to 300 million full-time jobs. So that is a lot of jobs. And what experts caution is that it's not going to automate away entire jobs. It's going to change the way these jobs are done. It's going to come in and do particular tasks probably faster and maybe better than humans do them. But then there are some roles also where people wonder, are these jobs going to go away entirely? And some workers are feeling the effects of that already, and they're starting to ask, who is going to protect us? What entities are stepping in to take responsibility for retraining or providing opportunities for workers whose jobs might be entirely eliminated by AI technology? And call center workers in particular are clamoring to get answers to that question.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the case study because you've met with a worker there particularly who was subject to that. But Stephanie, I'm interested here about sort of the ethics around this. What are employers able to ask of their staff? If they say, look, we've invested in all this new kit, it just needs to learn how to do your job. So off you go and teach it. I mean, that's not okay, is it?
No, I mean, I think that would be incredibly demoralizing for anybody who's asked to do that. So I think employers really are going to have to think about the messaging, but also the after plan. So once you've trained up an AI to do your supposedly banal tasks, what are employers offering are the higher value, more creative, more interesting tasks. They're offering you a new career path. That's going to involve a lot of money and time and investment, strategic thinking on behalf of employers to do that. One of the questions I wanted to ask Emma, since we've had her on the program, it's a great article she wrote in the New York Times. I wondered if we would actually see an increase in union membership for private sector workers. In the United States, your article mentions that something like 6% of workers in the private sector in the US are in unions. Could we see something much bigger going on as a response to this?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think when we ask ourselves what entities are going to step in to help workers who feel that their jobs are at risk because of AI, a lot of workers are saying, well, this is a really important role for unions to play. And I think this is particularly the case for workers who maybe don't have as much education or don't have the ability that some higher income white collar workers do to easily switch between jobs. Right. So if some workers see that AI is coming for their jobs, they might very easily be able to shift into more interesting or more exciting or more fulfilling roles. But a lot of workers, particularly those without as much education, will have a harder time doing so. And so they are going to rely more heavily on their unions to advocate for them. And in particular, the role that I'm seeing unions play is just reminding employers that they should be bringing workers to the table to help make and shape decisions around the way that AI is used in the workplace.
Yeah, and Emma, is there an argument that actually the people making all the decisions about the AI are not the ones who will be affected by that change? It's workers further down the food chain that will find their job disappears before the ones sat in the boardroom.
Exactly. I think what I'm hearing from a lot of workers is that they want to feel that their voices are part of the process in deciding how AI is going to be used, especially, the call center worker who I shadowed. She felt really frustrated because she felt that she was being asked to train her replacement whenever she used an AI tool, because the AI was watching her do her job to the best of her ability. And so what she was asking from her union was just the ability to be at the table making decisions about AI along with company executives.
And Emma, this made me think of the difference between what it's like to work in the United States, where union representation is so low and often in opposition with management, to models we see in places like France or even Germany, where it's a far more collaborative arrangement between unions and management within companies. I almost feel like the model for unions needs to be updated for the 21st century too. How do you see that playing out? Could we see that cultural change happening not just in the US, but even more widely across the globe?
It's an important question, and it's coming at a moment when unions in the US have already been enjoying a kind of upswing. So popular sentiment toward unions in America right now is at the highest point it's been in decades. So unions are becoming much more popular. The number of workers that they represent is still quite low, but you're seeing union drives at companies like Starbucks and Amazon, many companies that hadn't previously been unionized, and in industries that hadn't previously been unionized, like even architecture, for example. So people are hoping that this kind of momentary shift of power toward unions will turn into a more long-term and sustained power moment for unions, and that they can then play a role in pushing companies to treat workers well as they're bringing AI to the table.
And one last quick question. A lot of the times when we talk about job losses as a result of AI, it's like in the pyramid, we're looking at lower level jobs or maybe middle level jobs. Could we flip it on its head and say, could we actually replace CEOs or executives and actually end up having AI run companies and just get rid of those high expensive salaries altogether?
Absolutely. I think when ChatGPT emerged, people sort of had to throw out the door any preconceived notions they had about what jobs were most at risk because of automation. Because for a long, long time, people thought the jobs most at risk were like long haul truckers who are going to be replaced by self-driving cars. Now, all of a sudden, ChatGPT can write, like Shakespearean-like sonnets, and they can write code, and they can make decisions. So I think people are realizing you have to throw out the door any ideas you had about who is really at risk and say every job is going to be changed. And we just hope that the workers whose jobs are changing have a voice in saying how.
Yeah, it's Turkey's not going to vote for Christmas, are they? If those are the ones that could find their jobs being replaced. But there's so much in there. And Stephanie, just a final thought from you in all of this about, briefly, if you will. There's a real issue, isn't there, about who is responsible for retraining? Is it workers who've got to go and find that other job, or employers saying, well, that's gone, but here's a bit of help to do something else?
Yeah, and I think we also have to be realistic. You're not just going to suddenly go get an engineering degree in 2 weeks, right? Or learn cybersecurity overnight. These are highly complex skills that require usually years of training. So this will involve, I think, a sort of, again, look at the Danish model of the government and companies working together to sponsor re-education and retraining for workers that will take a really long time.
Yeah.
This is a total pivot of our economy.
Stephanie, really good to have you with us again, guiding us through all of this. And now, Emma, thank you so much. We'll be reading closely as your investigations continue. That is it. We're out of time. We'll do it at the same time next week. Bye-bye.